In September 2009, I had the opportunity to interview Nasr Abu Zayd at the University of Leiden in the Netherlands. Professor Abu Zayd and I had corresponded for a number of years about his writings, about his teachings, about his views on the interpretations of the Quran, and about his life in exile. On that September day, a cameraman, Carrie Fry, and I sat down with Professor Abu Zayd for a number of hours to film the interview that's going to follow. This interview is part of a larger project that I have been working on for a number of years to capture on film the life and the story of writers, artists, and intellectuals from Muslim-majority states in exile. Indeed, of all the hundreds, if not thousands, of intellectuals from the Muslim-majority world who ended up in exile in the 1990s, Nasr Abu Zayd's story is, without question, one of the most important and intriguing of the decade. Professor Abu Zayd was born in a small village outside of Cairo in 1943. He received his undergraduate degree from the University of Cairo in Arabic Studies in 1972. And in 1981 he took his PhD in Islamic Studies from the same university. The following year he began to teach as a faculty member of the Department of Arabic Language and Literature at the University of Cairo. In 1987 he was promoted to the rank of associate professor at that same university. Widely regarded as one of the world's most important scholars of the Quran, Professor Abu Zayd's troubles began in 1992 when he put himself forward for promotion to full professor at the University of Cairo. He had just published the Critique of Religious Discourse. As is well known, his promotion was denied, and he speaks very openly and candidly about the events that transpired during his promotion case at the University of Cairo. As he makes clear throughout the interview, he was both horrified and shocked with the allegations that somehow he had committed an affront to the Islamic faith, a charge that was brought against him by one of his colleagues who was responsible for overseeing his promotion case at the University of Cairo. He faults very clearly in the interviews the administrators at the University of Cairo who refused to take a position against the Islamist extremists that were mounting a charge against him. In his view, it was a lack of moral leadership on the part of the administrators at the University of Cairo that led to the escalation of the conflict, as the conflict quickly transcended the boundaries of the university and moved into the Egyptian court system. Only corruption in all of its forms could have led to this escalation, and he makes clear that all throughout this conflict he never lost faith in the power of academics to somehow emerge victorious from the struggle. However unshakable his belief in academia was, there were still severe consequences for him. In 1995, after a few years of wrangling in the lower courts, the Cairo Appeals Court upheld the charges against him and, based on those grounds, divorced him forcibly from his wife, claiming that a Muslim woman could no longer be married to an apostate. His troubles augmented rapidly. The terrorist organization, the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, notorious for having assassinated Anwar Sadat, condemned Nasr Abu Zayd to death and ordered his execution. He was provided with state security and lived under constant surveillance. As he puts it, his normal life in Egypt came to an end, and he had to make the rather difficult choice of leaving Egypt. From summer 2005 until July 5, 2010, Nasr Abu Zayd lived in exile. In the meantime, his wife returned to Cairo to teach at the University of Cairo in the French department. He seldom returned to Egypt, and when he did, it was primarily to visit his family. In the summer 2005, Nasr Abu Zayd was flying from Indonesia to Cairo. He contracted a rare virus and was hospitalized in Cairo. He succumbed to this virus and died on July 5, 2010 in Cairo. The tragic timing of his death, coming only a few months before the beginning of the Arab Spring and the downfall of the Mubarak regime, convinces me even more of the importance of this interview. At the same time, I have decided to reserve certain portions of the longer interview for the documentary film I am making on exiled writers from the Muslim-majority world. Therefore, the interview that follows focuses primarily on his scholarship and on the beginning of the troubles that he had at the University of Cairo. The interview helps us understand Nasr Abu Zayd as a scholar, as a man, and most importantly, as an Egyptian. As a favor, Professor Abu Zayd asked me to ensure that when this film aired, due credit was given to the institution in the Netherlands that had provided him with an academic home. He held, for many years, the Ibn Rushd Chair of Humanism and Islam at the University of Humanistics at Utrecht, the Netherlands. My hope is that by putting this film in a format that can be seen by all, Nasr Abu Zayd will continue to inspire and transform the world. There is no question that viewers can see here the mind of one of the greatest scholars of the Quran at work, and that the people of Egypt, struggling to overcome decades of tyranny and oppression, can find in one of its greatest citizens a cause for hope.
So name is Nasr Abu Zayd. I'm Egyptian, born 1943. Now I'm an emeritus professor of Islam and Humanism in the University of Humanistics in Utrecht, Holland. I'm also emeritus professor in Leiden University. I have been here in the Netherlands since 1995.
Okay, so can you explain how it is that you came to be teaching at the University of Leiden? Just the basic kind of sets of circumstances that brought you.
Well, it's the story in a very simple way. I'm still in a way a professor in Cairo University. Mm-hmm. I graduated in Cairo University, got my PhD in Cairo University in Quranic studies, and I was, I became an associate professor also in Quranic studies. It's the story of Quranic studies in Cairo University is not really a pleasant story, because the professor, whose name was Amin al-Kholi, who initiated and developed the literary approach to the Quran, and he supervised a thesis about Quranic narrative in the Quran, Al-Qasas al-Qur'ani, for Quran al-Kareem. This thesis have created a heated debate in Egypt that reached the parliament. Mm-hmm. And at the end, the university refused the thesis. And the student who was an assistant lecturer at that time was, kicked out of the university. And his professor, Amin al-Kholi, the real pioneer in Quranic studies in modern age, was prohibited from teaching Quranic studies or supervising thesis in Quranic studies. This was 1947. Okay. Since then, Quranic study in the Department of Arabic Language and Literature in the Faculty of Arts, Cairo University, this is where I was working, became like, a hobby. Whoever would like to teach it, it is assigned to whoever would feel he would get some barakah, blessing. So it is not anymore a field of academic research. Okay, so so then I graduated in 1972. And my intention from the very beginning was not really Quranic studies. Basically because I knew all about these problems. Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe for just a clarification, I did not enroll in university education in ordinary age. Mm-hmm. Okay, I had a very long experience. As a citizen, I graduated from a technical school with a diploma in electronics. Mm-hmm. I worked for 15 years as a technician. Mm-hmm. Okay, but my dream of studying at the university did not really well. So I enrolled in the university when I was about 25 years old. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of reading. So I was not just an ordinary student. I have knowledge about what is going on in the society, and I was, you can say I was just a little intellectual. Okay, so I know all the stories about the problems of applying any critical approach to Islamic studies or Quranic studies. I know all the story about Amin al-Khoury and his student who became a professor afterward, but not in Cairo University. Okay, so I was, although my keen interest was in Islamic study and Quranic study, but I kept, no, this is not the field I should go to. It's a very dangerous field. But because the department was aware of the necessity to have a specialist in Islamic studies and in Quranic studies, they enforced it on me to either to make my higher study, my thesis, MA and PhD on Islamic studies, or I find another job. This was, very exceptional way that I'm the only, assistant teacher who was enforced to do a research on a specific field according to the demand of the department. It did not happen to anyone after me or before me. So anyway, I have to comply with the demand of the department. So I was thinking how to make, Islamic study in an academic sense without exposing myself to this kind of, threat. The history of Egypt with this is, I think everyone will know what happened, for example, in 1926 for Taha Hussein, his book about pre-Islamic poetry, scandal, and I think just 1 year before the book of Ali Abdul Raziq about Islam wa Usul al-Hukm. Okay, so we have, events of resistance to any kind of discourse which deal with the history of Islam in a critical way. Okay. So I was aware of all these problems. I didn't really want to get into these problems. So I was very careful to choose my MA thesis topic. And then I chosen to study the Mu'tazila, okay, concept of metaphor, majaz, as it was applied to the Quran. So here I'm studying something in the history of exegesis rather than getting myself in exegesis myself. And my supervisor was really a very, very wonderful teacher, Professor Abdulaziz Al-Ahwani. He's not well known. So I finished my MA thesis in 1977. I got my MA degree, excellent. But doing research on rational theology, which is Mu'tazila, and how rational theologians tried to solve certain tensions in the Quran concerning the image of God, transcendent, immanent, anthropomorphism, issues like predestination, free will. In the Quran, there is tension between there are passages, for example, that could convey predestination. Other passages that could, convey free will. There are passages in the Quran that present God in an anthropomorphic images, with hand, eyes, legs, head. And there are images. There are another passages in the Quran that present God, the divine, as absolutely transcendental. Nothing resembles him. He resembles nothing. So the Mu'tazila efforts, and here the function of metaphor, the Mu'tazila effort was to solve, these tension according to their transcendental concept of the divine and their belief in the human free will. Okay. Anyway, this research have, to a great extent, brought a lot of questions rather than answers. okay, because the Mu'tazilites successfully, okay, according to their, to their philosophy or theology, successfully built their theory of hermeneutics on this dichotomy of clear, ambiguous, muhkam and mutashabih. Okay, there is a verse in the Quran in chapter 3, verse number 7, that speak about in the Quran there are clear verses, muhkamat, and there are ambiguous verses, mutashabihat, and people who have very good feeling in their heart would follow the mutashabih, okay, etc., to cause problems, something like that. But the meaning of the mutashabih is only known by God. The Mu'tazilites have built their hermeneutic theory about this, duality of ambiguity and clarity. So all the Quranic passages that agree with their own theological conviction became designated as clear. The passages that seem to contradict this conviction had been designated as ambiguous. Metaphor was a linguistic tool to disambiguate the ambiguous, according to the Mu'tazila. Okay. At the end, this has, established what we call the theological, or what I call the theological Islamic hermeneutics. All theologians took it for granted that the Quran could have ambiguous and clear verses. And the ambiguous should be disambiguated or explained or interpreted in the light of the clear. Okay, that's all theological schools agreed on that. But what has been considered as clear from the Mu'tazila point of view was considered ambiguous from their opponents. So the game was your clear is my ambiguous and your ambiguous is my clear. So we have to apply metaphorical explanation in different passages. Okay, this was the conclusion, that the Quran have been a field of theological dispute and theological debate. That the Quran has been taken into this direction or that direction, according to the preconceived theological idea. Theology, at the end of my analysis, is not something that is superstructure, disconnected from the cultural, social structure of the society, the debate about politics. So I connected this theological debate into what was going on in the ground since the fitna, the civil wars that happened with the fourth Caliph Ali, with Muawiyah, etc., etc. So this was my approach, that theology is not an activity that is disconnected from reality. In fact, all the answers presented in theological terms are meant to be answers to political issues on the ground. So now I understood, this is my conclusion. Theologians have been fighting each other, not only about the meaning of the Quran, but about the structure of the Quran. Because if you see, this is not muhkam, this is not clear, this is ambiguous, this is a debate about the structure, okay, which leads to a debate about. So from my first thesis, you can say that I came out with more complicated question than the question I started with. Okay, and these questions have directed me to my PhD thesis. I said, okay, this is theology, okay, which is very much connected to the social, political issues. What about mysticism, which is supposed to be something of a spiritual, ethical dimension? And here my PhD thesis was about the hermeneutics of the Quran by Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi, an Indonesian mystic philosophers who lived in the 7th century, which is the 14th century in Andalus, and then he came to the East. This was my PhD thesis. This PhD thesis, well, at the end, Ibn Arabi is like an ocean, because if you just get into, it's sometimes very difficult to get out, to breathe out. So it took me 5 years, but at the end I was able to reconstruct Ibn Arabi thought, and I found it's very, very utopia. Ibn Arabi is presented, a utopia that I found its impetus in the society of Andalus, where multilinguistic society, multi-religious society, people have to live with each other, and in the context of Reconquista in Andalus, and the same context of crusade in the East, Ibn Arabi lived this very complicated experience. He left Spain because it was under, going back to be taken back by the Christian king, the Catholic kings. And when he came to the East, it was not really, a better situation. Okay. So this kind of conflicting reality have, inspired Ibn Arabi of creating, a system, an Islamic worldview which could reconcile all religions of the world, the religion of love. So the elements, the pantheistic philosophy of Ibn Arabi, this was my conclusion. It's not really also disconnected from this reality. Okay, this is. Now the conclusion is any attempt of interpretation of the Quran, hermeneutics of the Quran, it's an attempt that should be understood and explained according to its context. There is no, and of course here I went to the United States for 2 years. I started to read about hermeneutics, modern hermeneutics, Gadamer, the German philosopher, and Paul Ricoeur, the French philosophers, and of course all this through English translation. Sure. And the first lesson you learn from hermeneutics is there is no innocent interpretation. Okay, interpretation is the outcome of this confrontation between the interpreter and the text. Okay, the text has a word, the interpreter is coming from a word. I mean, this concept of horizons. This helped me a lot in understanding Ibn Arabi. Okay, of course, I would say now that when I started to read hermeneutics, I was loaded by my questions coming from Ibn Arabi and the Mu'tazila, and okay. So my reading in hermeneutics was not really, a receptive reading. Right. Okay, it was, a dialogue reading. So I learned a lot. I have this my depth to hermeneutics that clarified the questions that is coming out of Islamic tradition.
So, just ask you a question. When you were going through hermeneutical theory, you were reading Paul Ricoeur and Gadamer. Those are the two principal.
Oh yes, yeah, with other names, of course, with other names.
I did an interview with Paul Ricoeur.
You did?
Some time ago.
I met him sometime. Yeah.
Okay, so you were influenced by hermeneutics, and then at that point you realized you had a standpoint.
Right. Okay.
And you had your own position that was.
Yeah. So my conclusion from my research on the Mu'tazila hermeneutics and Ibn Arabi hermeneutics, our conclusion was this: okay, this is exegesis. I mean, exegesis is not neutral. It could not be neutral. There's nothing like neutral. I should add to this. This is my academic, part. Sure. But there is the part of an Egyptian citizen. Okay, And I'm sure you agree with me. I mean, we are not, divided persons. I mean, the same citizen who is the same academician. Okay, reality sometimes provide us with the questions, and we go to our academic research to find solution to this question. But the question is not coming from purely academic sphere. I mean, we are human beings. We are living. We have our position. We have our conviction. We have to test our convictions all the time. The Egyptian society and the Arabic society and the entire Islamic society has been living in this dichotomy between modernity and tradition for a long time. Okay. In Egypt, in the late 60s and the beginning of the 70s, this kind of dispute and debate, which was peaceful. But some people suffered, like the people I mentioned, Taha Hussein, Ali Abdul Razak, etc., etc. But it became in the 70s very, very severe. Islamism became a phenomenon in the 70s. And the cry for the immediate application of Sharia, blah, blah, blah. This was very obvious in the 70s that led to the assassination of Sadat, president of Egypt, in the 80s. So all this debate in Egypt about the meaning of Islam was also on my mind. I was grown up in a village. Okay, I was born 1943, in which I lived Islam as a very, very open, liberal religion. In my village, Christians, Copts and Muslims, we never have any problem. Okay, in my village, and this may be surprising, okay, there were some homosexuals, well known by the society. Okay, but there was no, assault to them in the name of religion. Or what you know that your mother or your father whisper in your ear, don't get association with this guy. They don't tell you why, but I mean, child in the village would know everything. But there was no such, demand of religion to execute such persons. It did not happen. So this is the kind of religion that I learned. Religion of respect, of tolerance. People in the village at that time, very, very religious. Okay, but in the meantime, they don't really, make any, well, maybe you can make some jokes. Some people used to go to the mosque, not to pray, but to wash. Because in the mosque, in a village, there is a running water. There is no running water at houses at that time. So people would find, going to the mosque to wash and maybe to get a nap, without praying. And I was a child, knew those people, and of course, other people could make jokes about those people. Why don't we just, make two rak'ahs? Okay. But there was no such thing like you are a kafir, nothing like that. Okay, so this is the atmosphere I was brought up as a child, and I grew up in this. And of course, in the 50s and the 60s, Egypt, as this was the dream of Egypt after 1952 revolution. The dream of building a new Egypt, of getting off with the British occupation, having a society of social justice and equality, teaching, creating equal opportunities of education. And this is how I got educated. Okay, so these are the values that really that make me what I am, and I still believe in these values. Okay, things changed in the 70s, so the entire meaning of Islam have turned it down 180 degrees. So this is the experience of the citizen, and this is the experience of the student. Okay, something what is going on earth, it's very much similar to what was going on in the early centuries. The struggle about the meaning of the Quran, Yeah. So this was the question of my third book. Okay, so how can we get out of this kind of trying to take the meaning of the text, the right direction, I mean right here in the political sense, or in the left direction? Does the Quran teach us, capitalism, socialism, equality? Okay, what? So every meaning is possible. Okay, according to the modern Islamic discourse and the classical Islamic discourse, every meaning is possible. So this was my question: what is the text? Shouldn't we identify what kind of a text we have? The Quran, what kind of a text we have, before we go into applying any method of interpretation? Okay, the method should be derived from a good definition of the text. So this was my third book, The Concept of the Text. I have done this research on rereading, in the light of my modern knowledge, rereading the classical Quranic sciences, which is called Ulum al-Quran. Okay. The conclusion in this book was well, not really surprising me, but it was like, shocking for the society. Ulum al-Quran, okay, as they are introduced in Suyuti, Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, in Zarkashi, Al-Burhan fi Ulum al-Quran, could be generally classified in three categories. These ulum which deals with the history of the Quran, these ulums which deals with the structure of the Quran, and this ulum which deals with the excellence of the Quran. Okay. To study these ulum concerning, you study the asbab al-nuzul, the occasions of revelation, the differentiation between what was revealed in Mecca and what was revealed in Medina. You study the theory of Nasr, abrogation. You study all the theory that is connected to how to deduce the meaning according to the linguistic structure of the Quran. What is the relationship between the passage that designate a very, very general meaning and passages that designate a very, very particular meaning, al-am and al-khas, etc., etc. So studying this part of Quranic sciences, the part that deals with the history of the Quran, would easily make you reach the conclusion that the Quran is a historical context, that it belongs linguistically and in the domain of meaning to the 7th century, because it was addressed to the Arabs in the 7th century. Not only to the Arabs, whether the Arabs are paganist Arabs in Mecca, or the Jewish Arabs in Medina, or the Christian Arab in Yemen. So those are the domains. So we cannot understand the Quran if we take it out of the context and claim, for example, as it is claimed, that it was an eternally registered in the Widri Zayd, etc., etc., Lawh al-Mahfuz, something like that. It's historical, and it's linguistic structure. So we need historical linguistic approach. So this was, one of the conclusions, that the Quran is a historical text. It's a cultural product. Okay. Of course, there is a very, very detailed analysis of the concept of wahy, revelation. What does it mean in pre-Islamic culture, etc., etc. The first receiver of the Quran, Muhammad, the situation in Arabia, the situation in Mecca. Okay. But being a historical text does not mean that its significance is limited to its historical context. Okay, that's because the Quran, taken seriously by the believers were able to unfold, the meaning of the Quran in so many, cultural disciplines that reached, philosophy, theology, literature, linguistics, rhetorical theory, etc., etc. But this was done by the social actor. Okay, and suppose, this is my argument, suppose that the people of Mecca and Quraysh was able to destroy the nascent community. What would have been left in the Quran? Nothing, a manuscript that could be discovered later on and be taken and cleaned and studied and put in a museum. What made the Quran that we do have it, is the fact that generations and generations believed in it and tried their best to have their understanding of the text existent in their life. So this is an argument. But this book did not really create a heavy reaction. It was surprising book and celebrated by some people, not really appreciated by other people. Okay, but I was invited to so many, even universities, not only my universities, to discuss this book. And sometimes questions, okay, such as you apply human approach to the Quran, but the Quran is not a human text, it's a divine text. How can we accept a human approach to a human text, to a divine text? And my simple, immediate answer was like this. So you are suggesting that I should be divine to understand the Quran? And of course, the Quran is coming from divine source. But the divine have chosen a code of communication for humans to understand. So I'm sorry. It's only human understand the Quran. And sometimes this immediate answer, it was very immediate and very innocent answer. I didn't write it in my book, but it was addressed to me by a professor of philosophy. I was at that time, a lecturer. So, and you know how this hierarchy in the academia, when a professor is talking to a lecturer. So the professor was like, and I really immediately, in a very innocent way, answered this way. You are supposing that the only person to understand the Quran should have a divine, features. So the people laughed in the auditorium. I didn't intend to, this really was not my intention to make the person, but this was my immediate, and I was later on surprised because this is very convincing argument. Okay, well, of course, I developed my concept later on. I have been working on this concept all my life. This has been the question of my life, that in the Quran, we can speak about, and here also my depth to hermeneutics and to modern linguistics, the communication theory, etc., etc. Okay, the divine send message, but the message is in the coding system of the recipient, not the divine. We don't know if the divine have any specific coding system or not. This is our own, sphere of understanding. Okay. But the fact that the divine have sent a human, okay, to reveal his message to the human. So the human code here is used. How God spoke to Muhammad, this is very, very complicated theory, and I dealt with it. Okay, I reached the conclusion that this kind of communication, whether we believe in the theory that it was through a mediator, the angel, Jibreel, we still have the same question. How did Jibreel communicate with Muhammad? Jibreel is an angel. Muhammad is a human. But at the end, the analysis of the concept of wahy, it reveals it's non-verbal communication. Whether God revealing his message to Jibreel, it's non-verbal communication. or Jibreel revealing his message to Muhammad is non-verbal communication. But we have to take serious consideration to this aspect of the human dimension of the message. Okay. So far in the history of Islam, the divine dimension overshadowed the human dimension. Although pragmatically, the history of exegesis is dealing with the human linguistic approach, whether we speak about Tabari or Sayyid Qutb. Okay, so it's but anyway, I mean, so the book was celebrated. Even those who was not really happy with the book did not really make any kind of violent reaction to the book. This book was part of my file to be an associate professor, and it was celebrated in the committee, as an excellent research at that time. This was 1987. This was 1987. I returned back. I mean, I spent 2 years in the United States when I was doing my research on Ibn Arabi, and here I learned about hermeneutics. I went to Japan as a visiting professor for 5 years, and here I learned something more about Buddhism, Shintoism. Okay, so I can tell you, I mean, this really have enriched my vision of what Islam is, what Islamic culture should be. And then I returned back to Egypt. This was in the early 90s, and started, publishing other books and other papers. So everything was going smooth, and okay, until I applied for a full professor in 1992, and here all the problems came, and it is really not academic problems. It is more connected to political issues, connected to the fear of terrorism that terrorized the entire Egyptian society and the institutions, including the government. Okay, because after the assassination of Sadat, I mean, publicly, within his army, I mean, in his glorious day of October 6th, the terrorist discourse connected with a very, very radical Islamic discourse have been present everywhere, with all the, the government, arrest, but yeah, but it was there. There was another scandal in Egypt. Okay, a scandal that any Egyptian citizen could not ignore. At that time, the call for Islamism was everywhere. So at that time, there was tens of fatwas against the banking system. Interest in the bank, whether it is on loan or in deposit, is haram. This is riba. But within these fatwas, there was new emerging investment companies that claimed they are applying Islamic norms. No fixed interest rate, okay, but sharing interest and sharing loss. But in the meantime, they started giving 25% interest. So by the fatwas, and by giving very, very high interest, that makes you, even if you are not an economist, wonder how those people can do. I mean, is there any invest?
Because the Quran has prohibitions against interest.
Yes, yeah, but it's not against interest, it's against riba. Okay, but in modern Islamic discourse, they can easily make interest as riba and riba as interest, etc. And this is the entire concept of Islamic banking system that exists everywhere in the world. In fact, a thorough study of all these Islamic banking, they are dealing with the same type of dealment of ordinary banks, but they give it another names. Okay. So it's for example, if you don't want to make a mortgage, okay, with an Islamic bank. They buy the house and sell you the house. But it is the same process. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the same process. Okay, the difference between the house, they make the buying the house and selling the house just on paper. Okay, but at the end, you are in mortgage. Okay, but they tell you no, you are not in mortgage, you are not paying interest. Okay, because this is commercial deal, and according to the Quran, it's halal. If I buy something of $10, okay, and then pay it for $1,000, that's halal. This is because this is buying and selling. So this is halal. Okay, but anyway, I mean, at that time, these investment companies, helped by these fatwas that came from the official religious institution, and it was shared on the TV advertisement with ministers, okay, etc., 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 was able to deceive the entire Egyptian nation. That people, even some people, sold. If someone has a piece of land that it does not really give 25%, or someone is running, a small shop, grocery shop, that doesn't. People just, if a lady have some gold stored for in future, how people. So everything people sold and put it in this company to get 25%. All the people who went to the Gulf, that saved some money. Oh, it's great. I wasn't in Japan at that time. And the Egyptian who were in Japan, the Egyptian PhD student, was arguing with me, why don't you put your money in these companies? Because in Japan, Japan is an economic giant at that time. The interest in the bank is 3%. So my also immediate answer to those people, I'm not an economist, but I can understand if a company would give me 25% interest, it should have made 100% itself to pay the employee, to pay the office, to pay electricity, I mean. And this is only possible if you deal in narcotics. This is the only merchandise. So I suspect, this one. But anyway, people have put all their money, and it turned it in 1 year that the people who established this company just escaped Egypt with the money. Until now. Now we are in 2009. This happened in the 80s. Until now, people are unable to get their money back. So this is not only a scandal, but a tragedy. That religion was used to deceive people. And it was possible because of the dominant ignorance about the meaning of religion. The government have played a role in this. The institution, the religious institution have played. It is not even the terrorist who made this. Okay. This was all the subject, I mean, these different dimensions were the subject of my book, Critique of Islamic Discourse, نقد الخطاب الدين. And this is the book, the introduction of the book, in which I mentioned passing the scandal of the investment companies that inspired me that some critical analysis should be applied to this Islamic discourse. And I was very clear, Islamic discourse does not mean Islam. Islamic discourse is the human discourse about Islam, the human discourse about the Quran, the human discourse about tradition, the human discourse about Sunnah. It's very clear in my book that I am not touching the Quran or the Sunnah, but I'm trying to show how people are manipulating the meaning of the Quran, and this is very dangerous in the present situation. One of the three professors to evaluate was a counselor of one of these investment companies with a big month salary. Okay, you can understand that. Anyway, this person have written a very, very not negative academic report. It has nothing to do with academic report. It's just a report full of insult, accusation, kufr against Islam. This man is anti-Islam. He is like Salman Rushdie. Okay, all this kind of of nonsense. I didn't really pay attention because I thought that this is academia, whatever he would write, because some people have advised me, when we know that he is a member, that I should, make some sort of to say no, I wouldn't like to him because he was member of the. But I said, well, this will be only one vote, and this is academia. So my trust in the academic integrity prevented me from disqualifying him to be in the committee. This was wrong. This is my mistake. I have a very strong confidence in the academic integrity, which was nothing. In the process, okay, of course the university did not go directly to take, well, first his report was taken by the committee, the wider committee, as the committee report. Of course, they have to delete some words like kufr, but they deleted it, and you can see it behind that. The university, the rector of the university, everyone, I was supposed to give my consent, to say, okay, I agree.
You agree with his evaluation of you being?
Yeah, I agree that that you don't give me the title now, but in a couple of months I will reapply and you will get it. So this was a negotiation inside the university. Was supposed to be the victim, was the person that everyone needed him to say, okay, let it go this time. This is starting from the rector of the university, the dean of the faculty, everyone. This is before the final decision was taken by the university. For me, and luckily for my wife is a professor in the same university in the French department. We said no, because it's the future of this academia. If we say yes, let it go this time, then we will part of this corruption. I cannot go into the details of the meetings with the rector and the nonsense argument that the rector was trying to convince me to let it go this time. I said, well, we are in the academia. If you just endorse this report, if I say yes, and you endorse this report, how are you going to put on your CV that you endorse a report which is a piece of garbage? I told the rector at that time I would make a report against my writing, but it would be academic report to reach the same conclusion that I am not entitled to professor, but I would write it in academic language. If this is academic language, I would have nothing, but it's garbage. How can you ask me to say okay for a garbage and you are sitting there? It's impolite way to speak to your rector of the university this way. But I did not give a damn about all these titles at that time, because at stake in my mind here is the academia. The academia that I had the dream to be part of it. And I'm not going to give up my dream. No one is going to enforce me to go with this corruption. And in the presence of other deans of other faculties, because this was like a meeting, I said, read the report and tell me what is academic in the report. The report does not go beyond page 19 in my book, Dr. Khattabili. No citation after page 19. This is something, I mean, this is scandal. I mean, the man did not read the book. He was unable to read the book because he got insulted from the introduction. Anyway, this was a debate, and at the end, the university decided not to promote me. Anyway, it has gone this way. And there was, a lot of promises, something, just let it go this time, and, reapply. And it was, something like that. This is connected to the situation in Egypt. Okay? The rector was so afraid if he promoted me that those people who are against me could provoke, the student, the Islamist student to make strike. Everyone was so afraid from the top to the bottom.
On how this book might spark a reaction on the conservative Islamist movement?
Well, in fact, because I have been teaching Quranic studies since 1970, 72, and in my class, I give more space to those who criticize my ideas than to those who accept it. Believing that the student who just accepts whatever I say is not a good student. Okay, so I appreciate more students who have this kind of. Well, at the beginning, the student was, aggressive, but I was tolerant to this kind of aggressiveness until I teach the student the lesson to oppose ideas without being aggressive. So you can see that even the student whom, I taught during this long time, who did not accept my ideas, have very deep respect to me. I was supported by the student, even the student who are supposed to be Islamist student. When the university took its decision, and it was well known that I was not promoted to full professor because of my views, not because of my academic failure. The Islamist student have made a wonderful statement. And I'm very proud of this statement, that although they don't agree with all of my ideas, but I am, according to their statement, an idealist professor, the real professor they have made. This is something that is, really satisfies me more than the title of being a professor. But anyway, so it has been known in Egypt, so the entire Egyptian intellectual life was decided between those who defend the academic freedom and those who defend, Islam. Okay, so it took, some months debate in the newspaper.
Before going on to the next part of the story, which is what happened when you when your case went before the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question about a recent trip that President Barack Obama took to the University of Cairo.
Yeah.
And he lauded the University of Cairo as a great academic institution.
Yes.
Right? And he used that as a point of departure for his new policy in the Middle East. Having gone through what you went through in Cairo, at the University of Cairo, what are your feelings about Barack Obama going there, and then speaking about it in the way that he spoke about it? What do you think about that?
Well, I think this is my experience, which did not really make me lose my confidence in the academia for some times. Okay, this was a black spot. Okay, in the academia, it is a black spot in the academia. But if you look to within the academia, the support I had and I have you cannot really say that the entire academia is corrupted. Okay. Maybe people, when it comes to Quranic studies, are a little bit hesitant to speak out. Okay, but this is understandable.
Because of the potential threat of violence against them.
Yes, yes. In the celebration, I mean, Cairo University was established 1908. So last year was the centennial 100 year. For the first time after I left Egypt, I was invited by the faculty, my faculty of arts, to participate in a symposium, part of the celebration of the university. Of course, the dean now is my generation, even younger than me. And I just, I said, okay. He phoned me and they said, look, I appreciate this invitation, but I don't want to have it, oral invitation. Send me a written official invitation and pay the ticket for me. Okay. So I feel that you really, you understand that you're inviting someone. He sent me the written, official invitation. The university paid for the trip. And I was there. Of course, the opening ceremony of the conference was in the university, but the symposium itself was in an hotel. And no point can pass my mind. And that, I said, what is that? I mean, celebrating the university by such a symposium in an hotel. Where are the students of the university? I mean, this is official government celebration. So I was very, very critical. And the dean came to me and said, you are right. But there are, higher orders. So I said, well, to put me away, not to give a lecture inside the university. Is that the meaning of it? Okay. He said, no, it is not intended for you. I said, but this is it is. But I was able, through another challenge, the Society of Philosophy, the Egyptian branch of they invite me every year, and they held their conference in the university. So I'm invited, I give lectures there. So in a way, okay, I cannot really, I have support from this academia. When Obama, and I was in Istanbul, and I was at the airport, and I was really keen to, it was shown on the TV, but it was in Turkish. I mean, so I opened my laptop, and I listened to his speech. It's a wonderful speech. And I appreciate very much that he chose Cairo University, not Al-Azhar University. Because he had this choice, even go to Al-Azhar University or Cairo University. So he chose over, I mean, he did not choose, I mean, the people who advised him. I think it was very good. And the way he spoke, not only about the university, but about, his speech in general. Okay. I really appreciated his speech, of course, with my personal awareness that we are demanding too much from a person. Okay, especially in the Middle East. In the Middle East, people does not understand that it is not the person in the United States system that decide everything. It's not like Egypt, where the president is everyone. Okay. This man is coming to a lot of challenges, internal challenge, inside, okay, and global challenge. Part of this global challenge is the Middle East. I wish him success, but I see it's too much. It's too much to ask. His speech was very good. I really positively appreciate it, but some other Egyptian intellectuals, did not really appreciate this positive. So they find something, as someone wrote about it, that he was trying to, to present himself like a sheikh to the Egyptian people, and this has happened by Napoleon centuries ago, etc., etc. But I cannot see in Obama, because Obama belonged, to a family. Muslim. I mean, he is not claiming anything. Okay, the man is a great American citizen with a very rich background. Okay, and he just presented himself with his background. Okay, he did not claim that he is a Muslim, but his father was. Okay, and when he was a child, he was exposed. In Indonesia, to the adhan, to all these things. So it's part of his, of his consciousness. But some Arab intellectuals have this kind of, suspicious, meaning. No, I am following all these kind of speeches that he gives here and there, and his struggle with the Israeli. Administration to stop settlement. And I understand the difficulty of this kind of dealing with the state of Israel. Obama maybe have, a very good intention, but the relationship between the United States and Israel is more deep than to be a political relationship. It's deeper than being political. And how far the United States under Obama will be able to really play a neutral mediator role in establishing peace in the Middle East.
You actually, in your work, have talked about a Zionist-Christian relationship that's actually prevented any dialogue in the Middle East. That kind of partnership that's coming.
Oh yes, yeah. First, this is the macro context of of the Muslim world and of the Arab world in specific. The invasion of the Muslim world by European power that dominated the Muslim world at the end of the 18th century, the entire 19th century, and part of the 20th century, have created two opposing factors. The positive factor is that the Arab and the Muslim world was awakened to its status, its regression. Okay, and I always take this as positive. You need a mirror to see yourself as a culture or as a person. Okay, without a mirror, okay, how can you see that there is some spots of ugliness in your appearance? So it's being confronted with the West in the late 18th century have positively provoked the questions. Who are we, and what exactly happened? We are Muslims, and and Muslims in the 9th, 10th, 11th century, who created this wonderful civilization and this wonderful cultures all over the world. They belong to Islam, and we belong to Islam. So what happened to us? This was a real positive question, to which there was the response of rethinking, reformation. Okay, that the problem is in our misunderstanding. Okay, that we have been kept away from the true understanding or the positive understanding, and this, you can see this in Afghani and Muhammad Abdu, in India, from Shah Waliullah, Sayyid Ahmad Khan. In Yemen, Shawkani, and all those people that needed to rethink Islamic tradition, to return back for example, in the field of fiqh or legal theory, to ijtihad again, to open up, the gate of ijtihad again. For someone like Afghani is to return back to the philosophical concepts. I mean, Avicenna and Farabi. Okay, so this was a positive, but this positive response was encrypted with a fear. And this fear is with a fear of losing identity.
As a result of colonialism and the
as a result of the domination of Western cultures and Western civilization. And if we add to this a certain challenge that was, accompanied, this military invasion, you can find the discourse of some politicians and some Orientalists at that time, which would explain the regression of the entire Muslim world in terms of religion, not in terms of social, economic, political, situation. Well, I think you can find this in the discourse by French Foreign Minister Hanoto, that what is keeping Muslims from being part of the modern world is that there is this kind of gap, huge gap between God and the human that does not exist in Christianity. Because Christ presents, this kind of, human, divine, or other people. So you can see here that Europe, or the modernity in general, have been understood in this kind of ambiguous, perplexing way. It's the advanced, the rational, that we should imitate. Okay. But it's the aggressive, the dominant, that we should resist. This really, this kind of tension, again, you can find it in the discourse of the reformers. Okay, they could accept rationality, but if it is explained by the Mu'tazila or by Ibn Rushd, not the rationality of Kant, for example, okay, or Descartes. Okay, all right, okay, rationality, okay, but we need our own rationality, which is limited. Okay, so making tradition as the source of what to accept and what not to accept gave tradition more powerful status, which was not intended by the reformers. They didn't intend that, but this is the way things work. If a discourse is under pressure of two conflicting powers, okay, then you can see in one way it is open, it is liberal, but in another way there is certain fear of this liberalism and openness. You have to resist, being too liberal or being too rational. Okay, at the end of the day, you have to put wahy, revelation, as the way to control the rationality. Okay, so this is but very, very easy. I mean, in my analysis of the situation, I can make a point here. In 1924, this was the abolishment of Khilafat. Okay. Of course, this was, in my opinion, a natural development. I mean, after World War I, in my analysis, is like the declaration of the end of empires, and the birth of the national state. Okay, this is the meaning of World War I. Okay,
and that is what Ataturk intended.
Yeah, exactly. So the Turk wanted to establish their own nation state. Was already established in Egypt and in Syria, but under the umbrella of the Ottoman Empire. Okay, but there were a lot of criticism to the Ottoman Empire in these societies, in Syria in Egypt and in other places. When the Kemalists made a very wise decision, this was 6 months before the entire abolishment of Caliphate. They separated between Sultanate and Caliphate. Okay, so the Caliph is the Caliph of Muslims, but the Sultan is the Sultan of Turkey. This was celebrated in the Muslim world as like, to free the Caliphate from being connected to Turkey. But thing is, when they abolished Caliphate and they, initiated a republic. This created a sense in the entire Muslim world. You can follow this in India, in the Middle East, everywhere. A sense of losing this kind of symbolic unity. It was symbolic. It has nothing, practical at that time, but it was symbolic. But this was a symbolic unity of all Muslims. So it was something lost. So you can find in all these discourses about Caliphate, whether we should re-establish Caliphate, blah, 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 a sense of like someone who has been naked and he would like to cover. And the only thing to cover is Caliphate. Of course, there was an attempt to re-establish Caliphate, but the conflict between all the Muslim rulers, everyone wanted to be a Caliph. So it was a great failure. Okay. So the question about identity have moved from re-establishing Caliphate to establishing a nation state ruled by Sharia. And this is still the ongoing debate. Of course, there are certain groups that still are hoping for establishing Caliphate, the Caliphate movement everywhere. But you can see here, this kind of development have changed the answer to the challenge of modernity. Okay, the answer to the challenge of modernity so far was rethinking, reformation. After this, it was returning to Islam. And there's a big difference between returning to Islam, which means the golden age are the model. So there's a big difference between the need to reform, to rethink, to reconcile tradition with modernity, and the claim to return, which means you are not Muslim anymore. So this is the takfir. Okay, which did not start as this, but it developed in this direction by Abu al-Ala al-Mawdudi. And don't forget, in this concept, we have two states established after World War II on religious basis: Israel, Pakistan. And you cannot really ignore the fact that this concept of establishing a state for certain religious group became a powerful weapon for the radicals in the Muslim world. We have to be aware of that. And since then, the complicated situation have made returning overshadow reforming. Reformation has been looked at now in a very suspicious way as westernization. Okay, as just applying Western values to the meaning of the Quran, blah 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 blah, etc. So this is unfortunately the situation in which we live.
I wanted to ask you a question about the title of the critique of Islamic discourse. Right, it suggests both to be Descartes, right, and Kant. Were you consciously thinking about Kant?
No, not consciously. Not consciously. I wouldn't say I was consciously.
So you were using like theoretical linguistics.
Yes, theoretical linguistics. Of course, my reading was, but this is my background. Okay, about Kant, about Descartes, hermeneutics. But I did not really use any of these, concepts in my analysis. And you can find in my book, I don't really, make direct use of citations. In academic papers, I do that, but not in a book which is intended, to a more public audience, readership. Okay.